Racist cops shoot black woman's daughter. Seconds later, she makes them beg for mercy. At 6:42 p.m. that evening, the atmosphere in uptown Charlotte was as calm as usual. A light breeze swept through the rows of art-lined streets, and the fading golden sunlight reflected off the brick-paved sidewalks. And in the midst of it all, a 16-year-old girl named Callista Washington was walking home, carrying nothing but a passion for art and a thick sketchbook. Callista was not the kind of person who drew attention. She was an 11th grade student at North Pine High School, and every Tuesday, she spent her afternoon guiding young children in mural painting at the Community Art Center. That day was no different. After 2 hours of coloring and teaching children about hope and unity, she left the center with a backpack holding her sketchbook, headphones playing soft jazz, and a dark hoodie, an outfit worn daily by millions of other teenagers. But sometimes, all it takes is a dark hoodie, a certain skin color, and a dimly lit corner for everything to change. As Callista walked past the corner of 4th Street and Hawthorne Avenue, 2 patrol cars suddenly swerved in from opposite directions. Brakes screeched. Tires tore into the pavement with a harsh sound that seemed to split the evening sky. 2 white police officers jumped out. They didn't ask for a name. They didn't give a warning. They just drew their guns and shouted, "Get down! Hands on your head!" Callista turned, eyes wide in confusion. She pulled off her headphones, not even able to say a word, when the first shot rang out. It struck just below her left shoulder, ripping through the small chest of a girl who had no criminal record, no history of conflict, just a quiet young artist walking home after teaching kids to paint. She collapsed onto the sidewalk, blood spreading across her gray hoodie, and her sketchbook flew from her hands, opening to a page showing a portrait of a black girl with angel wings. Red began to bleed across the paper. Officer Benjamin Reed, the one who fired the shot, took a step back, his eyes wide in panic. He stammered, I thought she was pulling something out." There was no weapon, no threatening movement, no resistance. Just a girl carrying art and falling victim to bias. An elderly couple on their front porch screamed in horror. A store clerk 12 meters away dropped his phone as he witnessed everything. The air froze in place. Within just 3 minutes, the incident was captured from 2 personal phone angles, along with body cam footage from the officer who fired the shot. All evidence confirmed there was no threat, no act of resistance. Just one victim, and a trigger pulled too easily. And that was only the beginning, because they didn't know that the girl's mother, Astrid Washington, was no ordinary woman. And she was about to turn this tragedy into a battle that the entire nation could no longer ignore. If you've been moved by this story so far, take a moment to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. 6:49 p.m. In a soundproof room lined with lead walls and its private server, Astrid Washington sat before 3 monitors, her eyes scanning lines of blinking code. She wasn't just any analyst. She was the former director of strategic analysis for the Indo-Pacific Command, the same woman who once dismantled a transnational terror network with nothing but a 48-kilobyte encrypted file. But tonight, her screens weren't warning of an imminent cyber attack. It was her phone vibrating with a call from Atrium Health Hospital. "Mrs. Washington, please hold. There's been a critical incident involving your daughter, Callista. She's currently in critical condition." The phone hit the floor, not from weakness, but because Astrid had just activated her emergency protocol. Less than 3 minutes later, her armored Ford Explorer barreled through 4 red lights, slicing across the Tryon intersection, slipping into the emergency vehicle lane like a precision tactical unit. In the passenger seat, a radio scanner swept through police frequencies near the hospital. She needed to know who was there and who shouldn't be. Upon reaching the emergency wing's rear gate, Astrid didn't wait for instructions. She didn't flash an ID. She walked in like a commanding officer entering a military coordination center. and strangely, people moved. Nurses fell silent. Security guards lowered their gaze. "I'm Callista Washington's mother. Take me to her. Now." She was escorted through a sterile white corridor where fluorescent lights flickered and the air reeked of disinfectant. A young nurse stepped in her path, panic etched on her face. She was shot in the upper left chest. Massive blood loss. She's undergoing emergency surgery. "Who fired?" Astrid asked, her voice low like a suppressed rifle. We don't have official information." "Was it the police?" I can't confirm that." She didn't need confirmation. The nurse's evasive eyes and shallow breath were enough. Astrid turned, sat down in the waiting area. But she wasn't waiting. She was mobilizing. From a black leather backpack, Astrid pulled out a military-grade Lenovo laptop, shock-proof, triple-layered with fingerprint encryption. She typed in a 36-character passcode, unlocking a covert command interface once used during her tenure as a data consultant for a private defense intelligence firm. At that same moment, outside the hospital, a short video had begun to spread across Twitter. A black girl standing still, hands raised, shot down. No weapon, no resistance, no warning. The first hashtag appeared. # unarmed Callista - 8,300 shares in just 27 minutes. On her laptop screen, Astrid scanned the CMPD's storage network, pinging encrypted bodycam feeds. Each device carried its activity log. And she knew this. Under North Carolina state policy, all footage must be uploaded to central servers within 30 minutes of the incident. Right now, Astrid wasn't just a mother. She was the commander of a retaliation campaign, calculated, methodical, and morally grounded. And her enemy wasn't only the man who shot Callista, it was the entire system that allowed that trigger to be pulled without hesitation. She didn't need to cry. She didn't need to scream. She only needed the truth. And the truth was downloading, frame by frame, 7:11 p.m. While Callista Washington was still fighting for her life on the operating table, Astrid hadn't moved from the seat in the hospital waiting area. She didn't pray. She didn't cry. She inserted a YubiKey security USB into her laptop and typed a command sequence she hadn't used since 2020, a dormant access protocol buried deep within the 6th layer of North Carolina's state security data infrastructure. It was a backdoor she herself had built during a cybersecurity consulting project 7 years ago, back when she worked with the Institute for Executive Defense Data. A line of code only she knew, disguised under the backup permissions list, long presumed deleted. It took just 46 seconds to access. She went straight into the BCam NetVault database, where raw bodycam footage was auto-uploaded from every county. Under state law, a clause Astrid herself had once lobbied Congress to pass, all original footage must be preserved for at least 72 hours, unedited and uncompressed. She navigated to the logs for the 17th, entry 1842. Unit 34. B. Officer Benjamin Reed. Tag. Use of force. 1 click. The footage appeared. A young girl, Callista, stood on the sidewalk. Her hands were raised, eyes wide open. No movement, no warning. No freeze. The gunshot. She dropped. 4 more seconds, and the video ended. But it had already said enough. Astrid's hand didn't tremble. She downloaded the file, embedded a triple-layer encrypted watermark, and saved 3 separate backups on servers in Switzerland, Iceland, and an offline drive inside her backpack. Then she called one name, Darren. "They shot her," she said into the phone, her voice unwavering. "She's critical. I need you." 10 minutes, the man on the other end replied. Darren Cole arrived at the hospital in just 8 minutes and 37 seconds. He had once been a cyber intelligence analyst for the NSA, one of the architects of the national surveillance grid after the Blackstone incident. Now, his hair was graying, his eyes hardened by wars in Kandahar, Syria, and Manila. But nothing, none of it, had ever made him go cold like the video Astrid showed him. "She didn't move," he whispered. "I know," Astrid replied. "But they'll lie, and I'll make sure they never sleep soundly again." They got to work. Darren used a specialized device to infiltrate the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, CMPD systems. On his own, he breached Level 5 firewalls, accessing the internal command logs where radio transmissions, incident reports, and tactical responses were recorded in real time. At 1839, a dispatch was issued. Suspect possibly connected to armed robbery. Description: black teenager, dark hoodie, near Hawthorne Corner. No image, no name, no confirmation, just a skin color and a hoodie. And that was enough for 2 officers to draw their weapons. "This wasn't a mistake," Astrid said, eyes fixed on the screen. "They didn't misidentify the target. They chose Callista." Down the hallway, a nurse passed by. No one knew that within hours, the woman sitting there would shake the foundations of the city's justice system. And the battle wouldn't end until every shadow had been brought to light. While Callista remained motionless in the intensive care unit, with 3 IV lines, a respiratory support machine, and 2 nurses on constant watch, her mother's battle outside had quietly begun shifting into a calculated campaign. Astrid called a name she once swore she'd never use again. Raven Lynn, a veteran security editor at Vox, who had owed her a favor for 12 years, ever since a classified data leak only the 2 of them fully understood. "I have the bodycam footage, internal logs, and the edited report. Astrid, if I publish this, it'll set social media on fire." "Good," she replied. "I don't need agreement. I need an explosion." At the same time, in a small coffee shop in Brooklyn, investigative journalist Mateo Alvarez from The Intercept received an anonymous email. Subject: "You want truth?" Body: "We have footage. We have the full chain of command. Meet me." Attached was a 17-second clip. Callista standing still, hands raised, then collapsing. The gunshot as clear as a knock from death itself. Back in Charlotte, Astrid and Darren weren't just gathering data. They reconstructed the entire scene into a 3D simulation. Police car positions, body cam angles, line of sight from the nearby store, Callista's every reaction by the second. The result? The response time was only 2.4 seconds, from when Callista turned around to the moment the bullet was fired. Not enough to issue a warning, not enough to assess a threat, more than enough to call it an execution. Then came another email. No signature, no subject line, just one sentence. "I work in CMPD. I saw the original report. It's been revised 3 times. I'll send you the first version." Within 12 hours, Astrid had 3 versions of the internal report in her hands. First version: subject possibly armed. Second version: subject made a sudden move. Final version: subject failed to comply. Not a single line matched what the video showed. Not a single line was the truth. Darren skimmed through the pages and went silent. "They wrote the script before the victim even hit the ground," Astrid nodded. "And I'll let them perform the whole play before pulling the curtain, in broad daylight." She didn't release the video immediately. Instead, she let the system keep lying, allowing each news update, every press conference, and each spokesperson to become evidence against themselves. Meanwhile, the first strokes of color began appearing across the city. On the wall of an old factory in the South End, a mural of Callista with curly hair and a golden paintbrush emerged, framed by the words, "Truth lives here." The second mural appeared 3 hours later on the wall of Charlotte University. Then another in Camp North End. Each stroke was a voice. Each color is a form of accusation. The movement began. At first, just 20 students holding signs, then 200 from the departments of journalism, fine arts, and political science. Then more than 2,000 stood in front of Charlotte City Hall the next afternoon. Astrid didn't speak. She didn't appear on camera. But amidst the chaos of the crowd, one woman in sunglasses, a gray baseball cap, holding her daughter's blood-stained sketchbook, stood silently among hundreds chanting Callista's name. No one recognized her, but she knew that didn't matter, because the real war wouldn't be fought on the streets. It would be waged within the system, in the data, in the places they thought no one would ever look. At exactly 3:27 a.m., in the thick silence of the night, an encrypted signal appeared on Astrid's laptop. No sender name was displayed, just an hourglass icon and a line of text. I'm inside. I've seen everything. I can't stay silent anymore. Watchman. The attached file was a 47-minute MKV video encrypted under SHA-256. Astrid and Darren immediately ran a decryption using Tier 3 military-grade software. 9 minutes later, the image surfaced, a hidden surveillance camera feed from inside the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, CMPD, headquarters, capturing a shadowed corner of the high-level command room. At the center of the frame sat St. Joan, the CMPD chief, wearing a white shirt, sitting upright, face unwavering. Surrounding her were 5 senior staff members, including a regional inspector and the department's internal media lead. "Clean the scene immediately," St. Joan said, her voice as firm as steel. "Delete the beginning of the footage. Keep the middle section, just enough to show self-defense." "What about the incident report?" someone asked. "Rewrite it," she replied. Reason. Suspect exhibited dangerous behavior. No need for detail. And if the media asks, we do what we always do. Stay silent. They'll get bored. Darren sat in stunned silence. No need to rewind. This isn't a mistake anymore. This is an organized cover-up operation. Later that same morning, Astrid contacted someone who'd once been forced out of the system for refusing to falsify the truth. Officer Ingrid Vega. Vega had served as deputy chief in West Charlotte. Last year, she was demoted for failure to comply with internal procedures after refusing to alter a report about the beating of an unarmed black suspect. Since then, she had stayed quiet. But this time, she answered the call. "I saw that girl's face," Vega said on the phone, her voice trembling. "I can't sleep. I've stayed silent before, but not this time." Vega sent over a massive data package, recordings of internal calls, directive emails, ordering the rewriting of reports, fabricated report templates stamped in red with the word approved. Included was a recorded clip of St. Joan saying, "If we can't control public opinion, then we control the investigation." Astrid and Darren immediately uploaded all the data to 3 independent servers in the Netherlands, Sweden, and Iceland. Each copy was tagged with unique identifiers, timestamp verification, and source IP logs in case of future denial. Simultaneously, 3 civil rights attorneys, based in New York, San Francisco, and Atlanta, received verified packets and full investigative dossiers with a clause for emergency activation should Astrid go missing. And then, the fire caught. At 8 a.m., Raven Lynn published an 8,400-word investigative article on Vox.com titled, "The Cover-Up of Callista Washington, When the System Decides Who Gets to Survive." The article cited the complete data set from an anonymous source, along with stills from the original unreleased body cam footage, labeled, "Footage Never Released to the Public." In just 18 hours, Searcher Justice for Callista surpassed 1.2 million shares. Twitter erupted. Reddit is flooded with 3D scene reconstructions. TikTok saw an avalanche of videos dissecting reaction times, engagement protocols, and data falsification tactics. CNN, MSNBC, and Al Jazeera picked up the investigation. Within a single day, St. Joan became the third most searched term nationwide, just behind Ukraine counterstrike and Oscars 2025 controversy. But with light came shadow. That afternoon, Darren detected suspicious activity, repeated anonymous calls to Astrid's phone. Her email began flagging security verification errors. Then came a leaked memo from a federal internal alert system naming Astrid directly. Potential national security threat. Subject engages in unauthorized access of law enforcement data. She gave a faint laugh, not from joy, but because she knew it meant she had struck a nerve deep within the system. At 4:14 a.m., an untraceable call came through to Astrid's encrypted phone. No greeting, no name, just a single sentence spoken in an icy male voice. If you keep going, we'll dig up everything. Your past, your family, even the things you thought were buried. Darren immediately began tracing the source and discovered an abnormal data spike, 300 times higher than usual, surrounding the IP Astrid had used to manage Callista's files. The protocol signature matched that of an internal digital coordination system, one reserved for government special operations units. In other words, a covert task force had been activated. Simultaneously, the hospital reported a suspicious individual dressed as a technician, lacking an ID badge, attempting to access the ICU where Callista was being held. When confronted, the person left, abandoning a listening device hidden inside a bouquet of fake flowers. That very night, Astrid arranged for Callista to be transferred to a high-security isolation ward, with only 4 individuals aware of the patient's new access code. Her identity was changed to K.L. Alexander, a fabricated medical profile triangulated across 3 separate private health networks. By 6 a.m. the following day, Astrid stepped into the light at the Charlotte Police Oversight Commission headquarters, in front of hundreds of journalists from CNN, BBC, Vox, The Intercept, and the South China Morning Post. Astrid made her first public appearance, no longer behind sunglasses or a wall of encrypted data. She stood beneath the spotlights, wearing a black coat pinned with a Pentagon insignia. "My name is Dr. Astrid Washington," she began. "I once dismantled arms trafficking routes from Serbia to Myanmar. I encrypted the subterranean infrastructure maps of Al-Shabaab. But never, nowhere, have I seen criminality so thoroughly shielded by uniforms." Then the screen lit up. A 3-minute and 21-second video began playing across national networks. St. Joan, in a closed-door meeting, gives orders to erase footage and rewrite the scene. Ingrid Vega, in a separately filmed testimonial, stated, "I was forced to sign a falsified report. I can't take it anymore." And finally, footage of Callista, hands raised, unarmed, shot down like a sandbag in the middle of a quiet street. The room fell into stunned silence. A female ABC News reporter burst into tears, covering her mouth with her hand. Another journalist from Reuters shouted, "Is this a federal-level conspiracy? Are we witnessing a system that murders, then legalizes its data?" Astrid didn't answer. She simply said, "The question isn't, is it true? But how long has it been?" Outside the building, over 10,000 people had gathered. Police erected barricades, but they couldn't stop the sea of signs flooding the streets. She painted truth with blood. "Callista is our daughter. Expose the uniform." Above, a civilian drone circled, live-streaming the press conference to over 3.7 million concurrent viewers around the world. But not long after the briefing, Darren received a red flag from Tara, the systems analyst monitoring the network. Her voice came through the intercom, urgent. "Astrid, they're reconstructing your image as a radical. They're distorting data from your old military operations, building a national security threat profile. An internal warrant is being drafted. It's not official yet, but it's only a matter of time." Astrid gave a soft laugh, not out of surprise, but because she had predicted this moment. Dee prepared for it 5 years ago, after she last cracked a defense minister's offshore laundering ring in East Africa. "If they want a war," she said, eyes burning, "they just picked the wrong mother." The small garage behind the old house in South End, Charlotte, was no longer a place to park cars. It had been transformed into a war room, where LED screens cast flickering lights across a wall-sized map, and the only sounds were keystrokes and the whirring of server fans, beating like a heart on the verge of rupture. Astrid sat at the center of the room, eyes locked on the command lines streaming across the monitor. Tara, the tech specialist, was extracting data from an encrypted file labeled Urban Shield Drill. Charlotte Beta, recently sent by Watchmen through the dark web. Darren was pinning a thermal map of the entire city of Charlotte to the wall, with residential areas marked in red zones, where illegal urban combat drills had been conducted by CMPD. The deepest red clustered over predominantly black neighborhoods: Greer Heights, Beatty's Ford, Hidden Valley. A term began to stand out: Operation Urban Shield, Citizen Proxy Trials. In this context, citizen proxy meant ordinary civilians used as simulated targets without being notified. Astrid read the file description coldly. It was a psychological stress testing program for police response, labeled as high-pressure training. But no resident had ever been consulted. No notice. No consent. In a hidden clip extracted from Watchman's data, a 13-year-old boy named Marcus Reynolds was walking to school when 2 officers slammed him against a wall, searched his backpack, and screamed in his face, "It's just a drill to stand still." A man's voice crackled through the internal radio. "He's a scared one." Noted. Marcus later suffered severe PTSD. His mother filed 2 formal complaints. Both were ignored. Astrid published the footage to the Voigtleaks platform, captioned, "How many more children? Before you start to care." The video hit 4 million views within 6 hours, and Marcus 2 became the second highest trending hashtag nationwide, just behind Justice for Callista. By 2:21 p.m. that afternoon, the U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ, officially opened a federal investigation into CMPD. For the first time in national broadcast history, the phrase "human rights violation, Charlotte PD" appeared on the ticker of CNN, MSNBC, and even Fox News. St. Joan held an emergency press conference, attempting to deflect. "We were following federal training directives. This is a misunderstanding during the drill process." But every excuse was dismantled by Astrid, hour by hour. Each morning, a new video. Each afternoon, a new document. She didn't need to shout. The data did the speaking. When CMPD tried to trace the source of the leaks, they hit a digital wall. The information had been mirrored across 162 anonymous nodes worldwide, scattered across Finland, Kenya, Canada, Vietnam, and Brazil. Each time someone attempted to trace the source, the address changed, an active, living matrix. Tara, while filtering through Watchman's files, decrypted a USB drive labeled NW Protocol 9. Inside was a national training map, clearly identifying 14 other U.S. cities currently deploying similar live proxy scenario operations without informing the public. And the most shocking document, a federal funding contract from the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, dated August 12, 2019, authorizing $27.6 million to expand Operation Urban Shield nationwide. A projected impact report estimating 327 drills already conducted, with 64.1% targeting black citizens. Darren looked at Astrid, his voice dry. "This isn't about Callista anymore," Astrid replied without blinking. "No. This is about America." Astrid Washington walked into the marble hallway of Capitol Hill at exactly 9:46 a.m., carrying a document stack over 300 pages thick, along with a USB drive containing the NW Protocol 9 data. Her objective was clear: to confront Senator Claire Monahan directly, the same woman who had once declared on national television that Callista Washington deserves a national hearing. But as she waited outside the committee room, Darren sent her a photo via phone. Claire was seated in a private briefing with St. Joan and tactical advisor Greaves, a folder marked Confidential CMPD Internal Drill Agenda laid open in front of them. Astrid withdrew quietly. She didn't make a scene. But inside, she felt colder than during the Afghanistan conflict years ago. An hour later, Ingrid Vega, now a whistleblower, sent Astrid a message. Claire was promised the chair of the security committee if she buries the Callista case. They need this scandal buried before the election season. Astrid didn't hesitate. She contacted CNN and accepted a live interview scheduled for 7 p.m. In the studio, under the glare of lights and cameras, Astrid stared straight into the lens. "My daughter wasn't shot because of a mistake. She was turned into a variable in a behavioral force response experiment. And that could happen to anyone watching this video, if your skin is the same color as hers." Just 90 minutes after the broadcast, the clip of Astrid's statement surpassed 2.8 million views, shared by stars like Viola Davis, Trevor Noah, and John Legend. The hashtag #Astrid was right began trending. As media spun around her allegations, Astrid held a public forum in Charlotte's Central Square, where she presented the full drill maps, satellite images of the training zones, recordings of St. Joan's directives, and a risk assessment chart highlighting the impact on Black communities. When the segment played where Greaves said, "We need real data. That kid is the best candidate," hundreds of people broke down in tears. A young boy in the front row clenched his mother's hand, his eyes welling red. At 10:13 p.m. that same night, Graves was arrested at a motel near the Panama border with a fake Belizean passport, $15,000 in cash, and 2 unactivated SIM cards. As he was handcuffed, he said only one thing: "I was just the tech guy. This wasn't supposed to go this far." That very night, the FBI conducted 3 simultaneous raids on CMPD's data warehouses, seizing over 1,400 classified documents, including field drill plans that included identifiers for minors, an egregious violation of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. On national television, a new figure appeared publicly for the first time: Darren Cole. Wearing a gray suit and speaking with a deep, steady voice, he told CBS News, "I used to be a tactical instructor for rapid response forces. I'm the one who taught those people how to identify targets in urban settings. Today, I'm standing before you because I regret it. I regret that what I thought was training has become the institutionalization of violence." Meanwhile, at Charlotte Memorial Medical Center, in a white room blurred by light and the steady beeping of heart monitors, Callista Washington opened her eyes. Nurse Larissa, who had been by her side for 11 days, shouted through her tears, "She's awake! The girl is awake!" A doctor rushed in and ordered immediate contact with her mother. When Astrid received the call, she said nothing. She simply stood still, then looked up toward the sky above Charlotte, just beginning to lighten with dawn. Inside the hospital room on the 7th floor, a special isolation unit with bulletproof glass and round-the-clock security, Astrid Washington sat beside her daughter. Callista's cold hand stirred slightly, then gently gripped her mother's. The girl's voice was weak but clear. "Am I still alive?" Astrid leaned down and whispered, as if reigniting the last flame of hope. "You stood your ground. Now I'll do the rest." Just outside, the entire city of Charlotte held its breath. More than 8,000 people gathered at the central square for an unprecedented vigil and prayer service. They held candles and portraits of Callista with her eyes closed, still holding a paintbrush beneath the words, "Not one more." At 3:12 p.m. the following day, the U.S. Department of Justice held a federal press conference broadcast nationwide. Media from 42 states converged on Charlotte. CNN, BBC, NHK, and even Al Jazeera were present. In a nearly 12-minute statement, the FBI chief declared, "We officially confirm this was a coordinated human rights violation, with scale and complexity beyond local jurisdiction, involving defense contractors and federal grant agencies." A 264-page report was released immediately afterward, detailing that $71 million in federal funds had been funneled through unregulated private security firms, including Axiom Sentinel, the company that trained both St. Joan and Greaves. The term proxy threat simulation appeared 73 times in internal documents dated between 2020 and 2024. 82% of those selected as proxies were ethnic minorities, never informed, never asked for consent. As America reeled, Astrid Washington stepped onto the stage at the University of Charlotte, where Callista had once led free art classes for children. In front of more than 3,000 students, faculty, journalists, and peaceful demonstrators, she said, "Justice is not a headline. It is not a hashtag. Justice is when my daughter walks out of this hospital, alive, not as a symbol, but as a 16-year-old girl with the right to live, to breathe, and to dream." Astrid's speech was live-streamed on YouTube and Facebook, surpassing 12 million views in just 24 hours. Meanwhile, Senator Claire Monahan, who had once promised a national hearing but was later exposed for collusion, was forced to resign after Ingrid Vega released an audio recording. "We have to silence everything before election month. The public can't take another scandal." St. Joan, chief of the Charlotte Police Department, was officially indicted on 7 counts, including destruction of criminal evidence, conspiracy to conceal abuse of power, false statements to federal investigators, and ordering the manipulation of crime scenes. At the same time, a special committee was formed by federal executive order, named the Callista Washington Committee on Police Abuse Oversight, comprising human rights experts, Black community representatives, and veterans who had publicly opposed systemic violence. On Saturday afternoon, Callista, still weak but no longer intubated, was wheeled into a white room where a large blank wall had been reserved just for her. A doctor asked, "Do you want to paint?" Callista simply nodded, then reached for the yellow paintbrush her mother had brought on the very first day. She painted a single dot in the middle of the white wall, no flourish, no form, just a yellow dot, small but brilliantly bright. Astrid stood beside her, not crying, but in her eyes burned a fire, not of anger, but of unwavering resolve. The war isn't over, but hope has begun. 3 days after the FBI press conference, as public outrage was still burning across the country, Astrid Washington made a sudden announcement on her only social media account, an unverified X, Twitter, profile, no blue checkmark, no slogan. "I'm stepping away from the spotlight. I'm not a hero, I'm a mother. All data, evidence, and investigative material have been handed over to an independent legal team selected by the community. This story doesn't belong to me. It belongs to all of us." She declined every interview request, refused all sponsorships, turned down book deals, and didn't appear on any late-night talk shows. When a major media company offered $1.8 million to chronicle her full journey, she gave only one reply: "I don't need money to tell the truth, and the truth doesn't need a copyright." At her final speech at Howard University, she stood on a simple wooden podium. Behind her, a portrait of Callista painted in oil, half the image of a young girl, half a blazing golden flame spreading into the sky. Astrid said, "You don't need a title. You don't need a rank. You don't need a degree. All you need is the courage to stop waiting. Because justice isn't something that comes after. It begins the moment you stand up." Then she invited Callista to the stage. The girl wore a white shirt, her hair braided neatly, her legs still trembling, but her eyes steady. I used to think I'd never paint again. But my mom taught me one thing. When your voice gets shot down, color will speak instead. In the audience were people who had once written letters to Astrid, a father who lost his son to a stray bullet in Milwaukee, a young woman whose arm was broken in a detention center, a police officer who resigned after refusing to falsify a report. One by one, they stood, over 300 people, saying nothing, only raising a hand painted yellow, inspired by Callista's very first drawing. The website justiceforcallista.org, built by a team of volunteers within 72 hours, reached 4 million visits in its first 48 hours, with nearly 120,000 people subscribing to receive updates on investigations into similar cases. Public pressure led 6 state attorneys general, from New York to Oregon, to sign simultaneous pledges to restructure police training programs and immediately halt funding for non-transparent civilian simulation drills. Right there in Charlotte, where the wound still hadn't healed, a unanimous 9-0 vote passed in the city council. East River Park would be renamed Callista Park. At the dedication ceremony, a 2.7-meter-tall statue was unveiled in the center, depicting Callista bent over a painting, holding a yellow brush. Behind her were layers of graffiti painted by local children, echoing a single message again and again. Truth lives here. The very phrase Callista had chalked on a brick wall when she was 14, starting her first free art classes at the community center. That evening, Astrid stood behind the crowd, wearing a plain coat, candle in hand, saying nothing. She stepped back, giving the stage to the community, to those who were no longer silent. Thousands of flames flickered into the night. People began to sing, "Lift every voice and sing," not as a funeral hymn, but as a song of triumph. And just as the light washed over the city of Charlotte, an anonymous email appeared on Tara's laptop, the technician who had supported Astrid from the beginning. "Charlotte isn't the only place. Come to Chicago. The next story is waiting." Something had finally begun to change. Join us in sharing powerful stories by clicking like and subscribing. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with meaningful lessons and heartfelt empathy.